Bula, CFL, the force behind Legend FM, turns 40 this year. And as part of our 40th birthday celebrations, Legend FM will be bringing you voices you once heard on the airwaves. And to kickstart things off for our radio rambles is none other than Kim Beddoes. Good morning, Kim. Please just introduce yourself.
Good morning, I'm Kim Beddoes. I am from Nandi, and 22 years ago, I was on Legend FM. I was the host for the Legend FM Simply Sunday, and then I later became the co-host for Legend FM Breakfast. So glad to be here.
I'm assuming you were the first female
As far as I know, I think I was the first female breakfast show co-host on Legend FM.
What inspired you to get into radio?
I guess it comes back to the event side of things. So I can't save myself, I think, but I come from an entertainment family. My uncle, Bill Beddoes, is an amazing singer. I've got aunts that are amazing singers. My father can sing. So I grew up in a family full of singers and entertainers. So light, sound, action, it's what I'm naturally drawn to. The job at Legend FM wasn't one that I applied for. As I mentioned, in 2003, I was working for the South Pacific Games, and as my role of the events coordinator, a big part of it was organizing events for the public and getting the Fiji public excited about this big sporting event. And as part of that, I had to often come on radio and do interviews on radio and TV and in the media. So I'm assuming that's how Charles Taylor, who's the now GM, he was the Legend FM director then. He called me up at work one day and introduced himself and just said, hey, we think you'd be really kind of good on radio. Would you like to come in and do a test run? I was like, oh yeah, okay, sure. So that was it. I came in, I did a quick test run. And you know, it's quite funny. As a kid growing up, particularly as a teenager, I was embarrassed about my voice because all the girls had lovely high-pitched, squeaky voices. And I had this deep voice that, you know, some mornings I sound like a man. And so I've always been very conscious of that. And I always thought it was a negative thing. And I didn't realize that actually on radio, it translated pretty well. So that's how I joined Legend FM. Michael Benefield, he was a night show host at the time. He was tasked with the job of teaching me how to use the consoles and everything. That was an easy learn. And then they threw me straight into my first show, which was the Legend FM Simply Sunday. So I came in to replace Gaetan Austin, who was migrating at the time. So I replaced Gaetan Austin. I loved Legend FM Simply Sunday. It was 6 a.m. till midday. I remember asking Charles, like, what's the parameters? What can I talk about? What can't I talk about? And I remember the parameters is stay away from politics and religion. Everything else, it's open sesame. But it is Sunday morning, you know, like people still waking up. It's a slower day. So yeah, I'd been in Legend FM Simply Sunday for about a month when I was offered the position of co-host for Legend FM Breakfast.
Nice. What was your biggest challenge as a radio personality?
The nicest way to put it is when I started Legend FM Breakfast, I was brought in, there was a male host, and I was brought in to bring some female balance to the show. And let's just say myself and my co-host didn't see eye to eye on worldviews. We were two very different people with really different opinions. So I'll admit now there was quite a few mornings during news break where I'd be running into the toilet and just crying my eyeballs out and coming back on air. So obviously our different opinions were on quite big issues, which upset me deeply. But if there's one thing I've learned in life, it's what doesn't kill you only makes you stronger. So I'm very grateful to Charles, who at the time was the Legend FM director, because I did, tell him I was struggling. And he pointed out that, listeners can hear that, they can hear you being made fun of in a not so nice way live on air and things like that. And they will, they will understand and they will warm to you. And that was, I guess, the beginning of me realizing what quite deep relationship you have with your listeners after a while. So that was my only challenge.
Wow.
And not enough time to talk.
Right.
3 hours is not enough for the breakfast. That's why doing Sunday was great, because I got 6 hours to talk then, and then only 3 hours during the weekdays.
Well, what's an unforgettable moment for you on radio?
I guess the context is different. So if it was FM 96, it's a funny, silly things, or not silly, sorry. FM 96 is great, but Legend FM, more mature audience. My favorite thing was the interview of the new police commissioner. So Fiji had a new Australian police commissioner coming to Fiji, and I thought, that'd be good, interesting person to interview on Legend Simply Sunday. That's a topical issue. So I wrote to the Fiji Police Force. I introduced myself, explained that I'd like to interview him. At first, they were not having a bar of it, but as I explained myself further, then they were open to it. So the long story short, on the day they agreed, on the Sunday morning, he arrived at the station. It was very exciting because the police came through first. First time, some police officers turned up at the studio. I was like, I forgot what it was for. They came and they checked the studio and everything, and they went out. And when the late Andrew Hughes, when he turned up, he actually brought his wife along. And they sat down and we did the interview, and it was awesome. And I essentially, so totally inappropriately, told him he was handsome. He was very handsome. And I told him so in front of his wife. And I said, ooh, the viewership on TV is just going to increase dramatically now. I said, because you're going to be Fiji's 007. And he had a good Kyla. He took it really well. He had a good Kyla about it and laughed. And at the tail end, I asked him to do a dedication. And I explained about Fiji and, dedications. We're all big on our dedications. So choose a song. He chose the song, The Heat Is On. My gosh, I still remember that. The Heat Is On. Yeah. He chose this, The Heat Is On. And then he did the intro before the song started. And he said, this is a dedication to the thieves and criminals and the would-be criminals out there. I just want to let you know the heat is on. And then the music came on. It was flipping awesome. So that was my best experience. But we had such a great time that at the end of the interview, I asked the wife, can I interview you next weekend? And she's like, oh my gosh, sure. So the next weekend, they both turned up again. And I got to interview his lovely wife in the context of what it's like being married to someone in such a stressful and high position as the Commissioner of Police. And so before we started the interview, he actually commented that every welcome, because they had multiple welcome cocktail parties, the new High Commissioner. So every cocktail party he attended in that first week on the job, every single person he met, including the late Prime Minister, Garase, called him 007. And then he said, so you have more listeners at Legend FM than you possibly even realize, because everywhere I go, people are calling me 007. So anyway, that was one of the highlights for me. And for me personally, as a citizen, he went on to be one of the best High Commissioners we had in a really long time. So I was so proud and honored to be the first media person to interview him.
So because this is part of our Communications Fiji Limited 40th birthday, how have you seen radio evolve over the years, and what impacts have had a hand in that?
22 years ago, I shouldn't say that so often. I sound like really old. But when I was on Legend FM 22 years ago, one of the common jokes was, radio suits you, mean joke, radio suits you because we don't have to see what you look like. So because on radio, social media didn't exist. So Facebook didn't exist. Can you imagine? Google didn't, well, if it did exist, it didn't exist in Fiji. We had YouTube, but like the very base level of YouTube. So social media didn't exist, and so you were just a voice and not a face, which is kind of cool as well. And until one night, I was at O'Reilly's back bar, and this guy was I noticed him just around, moving around me. I didn't know who he was, and then finally he walked up to me and said, hello, are you Kim Beddoes from Legend FM? And I said, oh my God, yes, I am. And I said, he said, I thought so. I've been listening to your voice. I wasn't sure, but I know for certain now that it's you. And he said, he stood back, and I never forget it. He looked at me, he said, you look nothing like your voice sounds. And I went, oh, how so? He said, for some reason, I was expecting a big, tall, 6 foot tall blonde with a big chest. And I went, not so appropriate nowadays, but I was like, oh, wow. And I was like, oh, this should be a massive disappointment then, wouldn't it? And then we had a good Kyla. But anyway, back then, social media wasn't a thing. Internet was only just becoming a thing. And then fast forward to today, social media is everything. I mean, you get your news online, you get your news from your news feed. And I think CFL was really smart with Fiji Villager. Fiji Village was ahead of its time. So I guess CFL was definitely looking to the future and was ahead of its time by having Fiji Village, which of course now is like a leading source for news and current affairs. Well, yeah, social media has, I think, without a doubt, been the biggest change. One thing that has remained the same, though, is if you have been given the privilege and honor of being a news or radio or TV personality, you have the power to influence people's opinions and people's minds. So same opinion I had back then is the same opinion I have now. If you've been given that platform, use it wisely. Don't use it to spread hate. Don't use it to spread misinformation and disinformation. Use it to spread knowledge and love and care and compassion for fellow humans, compassion for animals, and care for our environment. So that hasn't changed, and I don't think that'll ever change. Yeah.
Looking back on your radio career, what advice would you give your younger self?
Just enjoy it. I loved it. I did not want to leave. I only left because I think when I moved to the UK, it was the last or second last batch of intakes they were allowing, and then they canceled that program. So if I could have pushed back migrating, I would have, but it just wasn't an option then. No, just enjoy, and make sure to always be a positive influence. I think on breakfast, Legend FM breakfast with my final co-host before I migrated was with Neil Foon. And without a doubt, I will say that the best job, I've been blessed, the best job I ever had in my life was to be the events coordinator of the South Pacific Games. Equal best was being on radio, particularly the Legend FM breakfast show with Neil Foon and I. And the third best, of course, is running my own business and being my own boss. But it was like getting up every morning and playing awesome music that just lifts your day, makes you feel happy, and having a good Talanoa session with a good friend. And funnily enough, when Neil and I were on breakfast, we didn't really know each other. And we got on like a house on fire on radio, but we didn't really know each other. And since then, we've become good friends, and we've remained friends ever since. It was really, really awesome, and it was a great positive way to kickstart your day. And I think life, particularly as you become an adult and you have bills to pay and stresses to deal with and dramas in your life to deal with, just waking up in the morning and having positive vibes and great music to put you in the right frame of mind and the right mood for the day, it was the best job ever.
What's your fondest memory of CFL?
Ooh. It's hard to remember a specific memory when there was just so much laughing. Again, specifically with Neil, we spent so much of our time laughing. One of the fond memories I have was there was a jazz and music festival. It was held in what is now called Novotel, used to be called Macambo. And Macambo have this big oval space in the back of their hotel that used to be used for awesome events. I wish they'd use it for events now, but anyway. And they had a music festival then, so we traveled down with, I remember Paul Takala, the late Paul Takala, Foto Lindor. Foto was the mid-morning show after breakfast. We went down and we met the jazz musos there. That was a good experience. Another highlight, again funny, was Shortland Street was the show, absolute the show to watch. And two of the key stars came to Fiji and we got to interview them on breakfast, and it was quite funny because Neil was just dressed to the nines. I was absolutely, because you know, to be honest, when you're on air back in those days when no one can see you, you just one step above pajamas. That's the reality, because no one can see you, they can only hear you. So this was a special occasion. We got dressed nicely, makeup and everything, because of course, I can't remember their names, but the two actor and actress, the actor was He was fine. So we wanted to put on our best foot forward. And we interviewed them. They were great. They were so easy to deal with, so much smaller in real life. You know, TV and screen makes you look much bigger. They were so small in real life, and we interviewed them, had good laughs, and then Neil and I had a good laugh afterwards because they were a couple. We didn't know. We thought they were both two single people we were interviewing, so we were doing our best to impress, and we dallied because they were a lovely couple. But anyway, that was fun. There's so many memories, I can't put them all on, but most of it is just laughter and great music is the kind of key takeaways that I remember.
Last question, what's your advice for somebody thinking of joining the radio industry?
If you're like me, Monday to Friday, 8 to 5 was never going to be the kind of job I was ever interested in. I cannot conform to a square box of a Monday to Friday, 8 to 5 job. I have always liked doing things different, and a radio station, particularly like CFL, because you could join the total events business, or you could join the production side of the business, or the actual news, or being a host. There's so many options. I think go for it. If you're a creative person by nature, and if you're keen to just learn and just give it your best shot, then I would say go for it.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us, Kim. And again, this is all part of our Radio Rambles.